Rishi of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is, of course, David Morisuti. David, welcome to the program. How was your week?
Lots and lots and lots of fish.
And I had a lot of that stuff too. Um, I have my 94-year-old mother here wanting to keep cooking. I had to literally twist her arm not to cook today. She's cooked like 4 days in a row, 4 nights, 4 days in a row. And today I forced her not to cook and said, "You're eating pizza and we're going to get it." And got the pizza, and she just wants to cook away.
She
I
slept
hope
the entire time too. I know that.
I hope when I'm 94, I have the energy to be resisted by my children.
Was the pizza good at least? Did you get her the good pizza?
Uh, Old Italian standard pizza, just onions, mozzarella sauce, just an onion thin crust pizza.
Okay.
Simple, simple. For her, that's what it is. Ours, on the other hand, was a deluxe,
Ah,
which basically is everything, including the kitchen sink.
interesting.
Yeah, so we ordered two pizzas. Yeah, so it's food at this time of year is, I think, an expectation everyone has, and I guess are you a traditionalist or are you an experimenter?
Oh, I no, I'm a traditionalist.
So am I, kind of. It's kind of dictated by whoever's at the stove. I'm a follower. I'll follow the food that's cooked anywhere. That'll be where I land. Yeah, no, I'm a traditionalist too. I like having fish. It's the Christian Judeo background. Raised and being, of course, ethnic background, and fish is the Christmas food, if you will. It's just like no meat on Friday, fish on Friday. I'm not that traditional,
No.
but um, it gets convenient when you both like when you both like fish. You just go, okay, we'll have the fish, we'll go to the place to buy the fish, we'll have it on Friday. It's sort of slotted in there: pizza Monday, fish on Friday, and every other square is filled with whatever. How about you?
Uh, it, it's just funny because when you go through like in our like in the Italian household, Christmas Eve is like the big thing.
Absolutely.
And we decided, usually it's Christmas Eve dinner. We decided to do lunch instead.
Yeah,
And
but you did lunch at like 3 o'clock, right?
no,
Three
we did
four
it
o'clock.
about 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock.
Oh, you had it that early. That's a lot of effort early in the morning.
No, Frank. It doesn't start in the morning. It starts the
Okay, the
night
night
before.
before. Okay.
It starts the night before. My it's and honestly, I didn't eat the rest of the day. That's just how it goes. But like, just to give you the idea, people, of just the tradition. My grandmother, my nonna, if she has to make a lasagna or like, let's say, a dish that she knows is going to take hours to prepare or do, there were times where I heard, like, I used to stay with her. She'd be up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at, because that's what I'm used to. If you eat that early, it means a really, really early morning for the cook. Um, but yeah, there's compromises that you have to make. There's social compromises you make because you know culture changes. It isn't a fixed thing. To associate it to sports and the Canadian Football League. um you know for us, David, and my family, it's like in the CFL, quarterbacks run. They're the key position we always talk about in the Canadian Football League. Uh, a mother and uh, a mother and her apron, they stir the drink at Christmas. You can't have a good Christmas without a mother and an apron. And I hope it doesn't sound sexist. I know it probably does, but I'll take my chances. I know if she's listening, it's a compliment. If other people are listening, I'm not sure sometimes. So I want to say, out of respect for my 93, 94-year-old mother, um, she'll be 94 in a month. So
Wait, this is a CFL show?
yeah.
I didn't realize. I didn't realize. I thought this was going to be talking about us talking about food for an hour, which I could definitely do.
Well, I gotta say, I guess you could say this show is a CFL show. Clearly, food lovers. Clearly, food lovers.
We never even. Sometimes we don't even say what the
You
CFL
didn't know
stands
that. You didn't know that the format. This is a CFL show. Clearly, food lovers show.
But I will say, apparently, there's a rumor out there that Adam Bighill likes pineapple on pizza.
There was a debate between them. They really that got into the locker room, and there was a bit of a debate about that. Some players were really, um, I'm not saying upset, but they're going, really, you're going to put that on pizza? But that's back to traditional stuff, right? I know that when I used to in my construction days, I used to rebuild pizzas, and I know a lot of Jamaican people loved pineapple on pizza, and they'd get a grape drink. Now, not all of them, but it was like Italians with pizza, right? There's cultures have moves that they make, right? It is the way it is. It's not about trying to pigeonhole anybody. Just there are things people like, and in sports, it's the same thing. In the Canadian Football League, it's the same thing. You look at fan bases. For example, you look at the Cat fan base, very rabid fans, and then you look at their owner, and they made some changes. This is a quick transition. I don't know if
Yeah.
this has any kind of methodology here, but just like a good cook, right? You have a recipe, right? You have a recipe and you call yourself a traditionalist, I guess. And the tradition in Cat land is that they have a lot of really good, smart people running the team. Now they lose Sean Burke to Ottawa. And what do they turn around and do, David? They bring in some really good experience to replace it.
Yeah. Ed Hervey, who didn't expect. I mean, look, there's one thing that everyone says in sports is you kind of always see player like names get recycled a bit, and I kind of hate that terminology because I just the terminology alone, I find it's a little just I just don't like the way how that describes people, if that's probably the best way to say it. But yes, we tend
You
to
you
see a
you
lot.
you don't like the way it sounds like they're picking them out of a blue box.
Exactly. But you know what? But I just in the phrasing of that alone, we do see a lot of guys move around. I mean, look, Rich Dubler has been on almost every single CFL team since he's joined the league on multiple occasions.
Absolutely.
I
And
think there's one thing about the CFL, and Frank, I think in your years of covering it and my limited time covering it, but knowing the league, you try your best to get those who really understand the game here because you can't just bring anybody into a CFL front office and expect them to thrive because the Canadian game is not something that everyone has the knowledge of. So Ed Hervey being someone who has been in the CFL for years and years and years, yes, his last job didn't exactly pan out, but for Hamilton, as you just said, they just lost somebody with incredible amount of experience and they're shuffling the deck and they need somebody that can provide some of that experience. So it didn't surprise me that it was somebody with a CFL background. And maybe I was just a little bit surprised of the position that he's an assistant GM
Yeah,
Um,
almost the feeling of getting a step down. But this is something that happened the year before last. You know he's on TSN. He was on TSN this year. Barker, Jim Barker, former GM of the Toronto Argonauts, former GM, sorry, coach in Calgary. He got around and he was walking the sidelines and was just a consultant for Hamilton. So Hamilton loves to have a brain trust, and that brain trust is wide and deep, and they continue to do that, and it might be a clue to why the team is so successful. The thing is, the management cap kind of confuses us a little bit in situations like that, because you wonder how they can afford uh, these guys, a number of them, right? Who I'm sure must be taking, I apologize for the term, but a haircut to get the work. Like a Jim Barker, patrolling the sidelines in Hamilton last year, considering the people they had in the organization, you got to wonder, A, how much they're paying him and what exactly is he offering. Not that I question what he's offering, but how does it fit in? We were talking about food and traditional recipes and stuff. You were talking about, can you bring in somebody new? I associate it with, you have an old recipe and you go, maybe we'll try something. We'll put a bit of this in here. Doesn't always work. Doesn't always not work either. So that's part of the challenge of running an organization, especially today, to your point that we talk about every week, and that is finding the money, because you can find the people to work in the organization. The question now is, can you find the money?
yeah, and look, I've said this many times, and I'll continue to say it. The management cap is something that I believe that doesn't serve the purpose I believe the CFL is hoping it serves. I've heard now I've heard two explanations for why this management cap is in place, but now you're seeing another case where another coach in Orlando Steinauer is now taking on an additional role as president of football operations. Now he's not exactly GM by title, but the GM has to in some ways answer to him, and it's basically he's doing the Chris Jones role in Hamilton. If we're gonna,
A hybrid version,
yeah,
absolutely.
and,
A version.
and right now, what that speaks to me and says to me is that many teams might go this route where certain coaches, if they're willing to take an additional role on top of what they're doing, they're going to get the job, right? Who now now it's going to be like, oh, who just wants to hire a head coach anymore? The head coach has to now also be an executive in some cases, and I don't like that because look, I remember in my first kind of understanding of the CFL, and when I started following the Argos in 2004, Pinball was both the GM and the head coach,
Right.
and he relinquished his management role to focus on coaching. And what happened that year? They won the
Yeah,
Grey Cup.
yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, it didn't really go so well after that. But it's so hard. I mean, and all my life I've actually had experience with that because growing up as a Leafs fan, Pat Quinn was both GM and coach. And sometimes, you know what? If a general manager, if a coach really knows what he wants and can get the job done, I'll do it myself. I also think that that also means who does he really answer to, right? Obviously, it's the owner, but the owner is going to say, "Well, I trust my GM and my coach. Like I'm giving him the keys to everything." It's
There's There's
Go
a
ahead.
slight difference, though, between the reason why you end up with guys like Pat Quinn doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're doing it to define their power structure. They're
Mhm.
reinforcing. It's more about, for them, it's the label they're looking for, because they want people around the organization and outside the organization to understand their position. And when I say outside the organization, I'm not talking just about the fans. I'm not just talking about the media. I'm talking about the other organizations as well, because that responsibility and his name attached to that responsibility. Um, everybody else knows how much power he has and what say he has. It defines a job description. And in the Canadian Football League, what's becoming clear is that, and I think Chris Jones started it. Chris Jones had a reputation as a winner, as a defensive coordinator, right? As a winner, Montreal, Toronto, and he turned that into something that became a head coach thing. And then to make more money, I've said this before, and I truly believe this. A lot of the hats that these guys are wearing are because it's a way of saying, well, look, we have this much money. It's clear we have this much money in the kitty. If you want 70% of the money that's in there, you got to do at least 70% of the work, or be responsible for 70%. And we talked about this before, where when that happens, then you got a guy like Chris Jones. He has to find somebody who doesn't have a really good reputation. In other words, a reason to ask for X amount of money. He's willing to take Y or Z, which is less, and hope to build his reputation. There you go with G. Roy Simon. That's why he's in Edmonton, right? G. Roy Simon it has been working on a management side of football for a while now. He, in BC since he retired. He went to Saskatchewan and then went to work in management in BC. And now he's going and he's now becoming, I think, more, I want to say, all in to being a general manager now. And he's got a guy that's kind of busy and a guy that he can kind of help. And I think he's been paying attention. I'm pretty sure he's been paying attention to the other GMs. He had Wally Bono to study under. Do you want to, do you want to study under somebody better? So, he's got that kind of thing. So to your point, and this is the one we all the time talk about all the time, how teams spread their money to management now, they have to be creative. Bottom line, that's what they have to do.
Yeah, and we've already kind of seen it through the years where the head coach is also the defensive coordinator, or the head coach is also the offensive coordinator. There rarely do you see a coach that has just one solo role.
Head coach.
Yeah,
Well, you're talking head coach.
Just being the head coach, like, is very rare in the CFL. I think Mike O'Shea is really one of the only. Him.
Well, no, he has his hands in special teams, doesn't he?
Like, in terms of like what Mike O'Shea's role, like, if I go to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers website, I guarantee it just says head coach. It doesn't have a bunch of the other titles that you would see with that comes with that. Like, yeah, see, like, looking here, head coach, and that's it for Mike O'Shea. Like, some coaches like that added responsibility because,
But we know different from the Grey Cup, though. We know from the interviews that I think it's less about him taking the shingle and putting it under coach. He does have his hand in he's involved in every facet of that team. And that came out in all the interviews, right? It came out that, he's looking over the shoulder of all the assistant coaches.
And that's the benefit of being just a head coach. I remember when Corey Chamberlain, I remember we were speaking with him about his role. He says, I don't get a chance when I'm coaching, I don't get a chance to watch the offense as much because I'm in charge of the defense. So I got to stay focused on the defense. And that's always been my concern. But I mean, we've seen Chris Jones thrive in a way, as you said, being in that dual role. We'll see how it works. He says that he wants to be the next, John Huffnagel, Wally Buono of the CFL, like, to be that caliber.
Well, to be that kind of guy, he's going to have to go upstairs and stay upstairs.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be one of those guys. I think what he's going to be, and I think probably even what he meant, because it'd be great to talk to him about it. I think what he meant is he wants to be long-term with a team, and it's less about his role. It's more about his contribution over time.
Exactly. And maybe he feels that by having both roles, it will allow him the opportunity to do that more, and especially if he still has the urge to coach, right? Some guys, if they're just in the management role and they're not able to have any say on the sidelines, That's tough. Like, imagine how many former coaches that become managers, and they're just like, like I like it probably kills them. I guarantee. I mean, if we know Chris Jones like we do, there's no way he would be ready to just step aside completely. And even
And
Orlando in the same way too.
and to take it to look at the other end of the spectrum. So you bring people in with experience, it's going to cost you because they have experience. So then the juggling act we talked about, bringing in somebody like G. Roy Simon for, you know, Chris Jones, so that they can afford to hire somebody who maybe doesn't have the pull salary wise.
Mhm.
And you look at the management structure, and you look at the management structure, for example, in Toronto, the head coach was inexperienced, his first year of being inexperienced, and they brought in a lot of other coaches. He had some really, you know, well experienced coaches. They brought Chris Jones in and they fit him in the cap, I suppose, the management cap. What happens now this year? When it comes time, I think he signed a 2-year deal. When he came, was it a 3-year deal? I'm trying to remember now.
With sorry, who was that with?
The head coach, the Argos,
Ooh.
might have been a 3-year deal. I'm
Yeah,
thinking, I'm thinking 3-year deal.
I can't remember. Yeah, I'm trying to think what Dinwiddie.
And I wonder if he has any bonuses attached to, being lauded by the league and being considered for Coach of the Year.
I think he has to win it, but I don't think so. I think
But
coaching
you,
bonuses, I think, are a little bit different.
but you know what I mean. As far
Yeah.
as his value goes up, that means the money they had for him, they have to find somewhere else to keep him in the same position, right?
Mhm.
So you got to take from Peter and give to Paul. That's just the way it is now in the Canadian Football League. So it's kind of a confusing thing. You look at a guy like Sean Burke who goes over to Ottawa, and now he's a guy who is in a position that no one denies and no one can deny that he is not ready, that he's ready to be in that position. Again, he's a guy with not as much experience. So, the budget is going to be what it is in the management side of things. They've got La Police there. The relationship between him and La Police is going to be interesting. I don't know of them having any overlapping history. Do you know of any overlapping history for them?
I don't believe so,
Me neither.
but yeah, I know sometimes when when a new person comes into a new situation, it's tough to know whether they can go together. But he's not taking the job if Paul LaPolice is the coach, and maybe this is a case where, hey, let's see if we can get this going together. But in the back
It's
of
a
my mind,
challenge,
it is.
David. In sports, it's a challenge when a GM comes in after the coach.
Yep. Well, I
It's a
mean,
challenge. But
it's
I
hap-
have it. I have it from good authority that the guy that was going to be hired as GM in Ottawa would be someone that La Police could work with. In other words, La Police had say in who the GM was.
yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me because, again, the other issue is, I
Or
don't
at
know.
least
We
he
don't know.
believed he did.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing about the CFL again with the coaching cap. Ottawa can't just get rid of La Police. Look at what Edmonton. There's a reason why Chris Jones also has to wear a lot of hats in Edmonton because they just let go a bunch of guys
3-year
that were
deal.
just brought in. You can't afford to say, all right, we're gonna just get rid of Paul LaPolice and bring in another head coach. Well, how are you gonna afford another head coach? It's also partially why I hate to say this with the Argos. This is their third coach. That was their third coach in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think that
And they
money
all
was,
had multiple year contracts, is what you're alluding to.
yeah, like, and one was a very prestigious head coach in Mark Trestman.
Yep.
It's not cheap to get rid of these guys, and we've seen teams get burned for that. And so I think that management cap is playing a bigger factor than I think a lot of people are alluding to. And I will continue to beat this drum that if it impacts the quality of play when you're not giving teams the resources they should be using. I mean, look, every team should be using it wisely. And I'm sure the CFL has said that we believe the teams can all run their teams with this type of budget. Sure, maybe, but when you hinder and you put a limit, then you're putting a limit on the expectation and what you expect your teams to be able to produce.
Yeah. And while we're talking about coaches, Ryan Phillips, defensive coordinator in BC, he's another guy that, you know, he's also a co-GM. So, the responsibilities, I think it has to do with the fact that there might be as many names listed in on the coaching staff, but I don't think as many of those names have the kind of experience that they used to have. So there's a lot of primary responsibility. It's really it's head coach, GM, and then you could have one guy be the head coach, the GM, the defensive coordinator, or offensive coordinator, depending on the background of the head coach and where they come from, if you will. Um, and then you have these assistant coaches that are really working for very little. And this is the part I think you're getting at. That's the issue, is that this means, you know, teams don't have a well balanced coaching staff. And then when you consider on top the other issue, why I agree with you at this point, I'm taking your side here and adding some fuel to your fire, is the fact that they only have a few hours a day to coach. So the less guys you have that are in charge, the less time they have, because they can only be in one place at a time, right?
Yeah, because usually when the coaches are working on the field, the GM is working off the field and usually is on the phone. So yeah, no, I agree with that because you got to be able if a guy goes down with an injury, or let's say you have a quarterback or two that go down. Guess what? You got to be ready to get on that phone and start looking out. In Jones's case, I'm assuming that's going to be G. Roy Simon's duty
Right.
or someone in that front office. So that works, but I think a GM really needs it's so hard to divide your attention in that regard.
That's the issue. But David, that's the issue that you're talking about. The more hats that a guy wears, the less he can do at a time. He has to he has to move on to something else. You know, it's not something that, you know, relaying information is one thing. Having it laid out, let's say in writing, having a template or a plan in writing is not the same as when an issue comes up. It's the issue. Each issue has its own little set of reactions, right? And those reactions all come out of that one brain, right? So that brain can only work over here, and then when he goes over there, it's just, I don't know if you're not wrong. I can't help but agree with you that this causes some problem where individuals are spread too thin because you want the best guys. I mean, it's like, I guess what I'll associate it to, and it's a little different with players because there are so many on a team. But if you spend all your money on one guy, what do you do with the rest of the team?
Yeah, and look, we talked about this a little bit last week with the quarterback situation.
There has to be some balance. And
There,
and
there
how does
has
how does how does Jones balance what he's going to do? And we haven't seen him do what he can do and what he wants to do over a long period of time, because he did it in Edmonton and then moved on to Saskatchewan, and then he did it in Saskatchewan and then he moved on. So can a coach do that kind of stuff on a long-term basis? We're seeing with Hamilton, we're seeing one way of doing something, and we're seeing with Chris Jones the opposite, right?
yeah.
And I think long-term success is easier when you have more of a brain trust than you have an individual. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm gonna use Michael Pinball's Clemens words because I used it a few times and I still believe it's probably the wisest thing I've heard him say. If I'm the smartest man in the room, I'm not doing my job.
We're in trouble.
Yeah, we're basically, he never wants to be the smartest man in the room, and it just talks to his idea of a collaborative mindset, having a lot of people who can come in and offer their, you know, offer their opinion, offer their, you know, Ryan Dinwiddie, I know for a fact, has offered his insights into a lot of the player movements that they've had. Every time we talk about a player, it's someone we've watched for a long time. So like there you do see it's maybe not be promoted as much, but yes, you do see head coaches are, a GM is not just bringing a guy in and saying, "All right, coach, here you go, see what you can do with this guy." It's no, they've looked at what there's a collaboration effort that needs to happen. And
Especially if they've been in the league for a while,
yes,
right? It's osmosis. It's not. They don't need a book. It's osmosis. It basically they grow into the position, and there's a lot of benefit to being around for a while in the Canadian Football League.
there is. And yeah, so I think you're gonna see that. I think this off season will be very interesting when you look at players who could be available. I mean, I think maybe my first prediction, I'll make one prediction. I
Okay,
think Charleston Hughes ends up in Edmonton. If Chris Jones liked I know that when Charleston had a really tough time in Toronto, it looked like the coach just didn't like what he saw from him because he was a healthy scratch of quite often, and part of it too was injury. But I think he has a lot of respect for Chris Jones, and Charleston Hughes is likely in his final few years based on his age, and he loves playing for Chris Jones. I think that's if you're Edmonton, you need to start a new culture there. I'm going to say that, and I hate usually saying those things, but Charleston Hughes is the type of guy you probably want to get things back on track.
and being released has no specific connotation. It can mean many things.
Yeah,
It can mean as horrible as you're not needed anymore, you're done. We don't think we can use you, and we don't think you're. Or it can be, here's your freedom to go find something to do. Or the other most important thing, which I think the case is because of what you said there, I agree with you. Charleston Hughes has the freedom to find a situation early in the game. You know, he has plenty of time to figure out what he's going to do. And maybe he is going to get on the ground floor with Edmonton along with Chris Jones. And part of, a player when they get older, a lot of players like G. Roy Simon, right? He retired and went right away into the business of management, right? I guess what you're inferring is that possibly, or without intending to, that could be something that we're going to see happen in the case of this ex-Argo.
yeah, and I think a lot of players, I think they're seeing this as, especially older ones. Hey, if I can establish my roots in a city, like the reason why G. Roy Simon, first it started with Saskatchewan and then BC came calling. Well, G. Roy Simon has such a stamp, a footprint in BC. It only made sense that
Right.
he would go back there. Charleston, maybe it's Calgary.
He's a good example, by the way. G. Roy Simon's a good example
Yeah,
of moves that are made for the benefit of the player. He was traded to Saskatchewan in the year the Saskatchewan was the favorite to win the Grey Cup, and they did.
yeah, and so like I'm just thinking, so eventually these guys need to figure out what the final move is for them. I think for Charleston Hughes, maybe that's it. We'll see. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting because again, we mentioned this last week. There are hundreds of free agents. Teams are going to be working it. Chris Jones, he's probably already starting to map out the plan, but he better be ready for.
It's going to be a challenge this offseason, David. with the XFL coming in, the USFL. There's a lot of football going to be played in the spring. Like people can talk about the weather, and I'm sorry, this is a whole topic thing. So what we're talking about here is GMs and coaches and organizations are going to be very busy in the Canadian Football League.
I think, yeah, I know. I think this. I believe the XFL isn't in 2022; it's in 2023.
I understand that. I
But
understand that.
you know, who knows? Yeah, we saw it. A lot of players left the CFL. They liked that American paycheck. Now, and I'm going to say this now, who knows how it's going to be in a few months from now, but COVID restrictions in Canada are not the same as COVID restrictions in the States. So that's another factor that players. This was every player I talked to, and some of the players I talked to during the Grey Cup, they could not wait for one thing to be over with this season, and that was dealing with these protocols. They it was so tough on them. So if they get a chance to get away from that, they will do it.
Yeah, and those protocols, for if I could add this in there, it had to do with their families unable to come up here. Like
Yeah,
there were a lot of players who came up here without their families.
a lot of players that came out with their families. They wanted to go and do
So yeah,
things.
COVID's a problem. It's a big
Yeah,
problem.
and it's still, and it's going to be a factor that I think teams are going to have. How many? I think every GM, most GMs acknowledged if a player's not vaccinated, we're not signing them. That's going to be a very interesting case for certain players, maybe of higher caliber, that teams are now going to have to be like, oh, we want to have you back, but guess what? If you're not vaccinated, it makes it very tricky on us.
Yeah, my point with the XFL, David, was the fact that I understand that they're not going to be playing this year.
Yeah,
But what I do understand also is a player is willing to sit out a year to get a better deal and to be in a better situation.
no, for sure. And some
That's my
players,
point. The sales pitch is going to get a little harder for CFL.
and you know what? Even some players, they'll take the year maybe in some cases, or they'll be willing to be a little bit more patient, or they'll say, you know what,
We
I'll
saw
take
we
that
saw
1
it.
year deal.
You're right. We saw a lot of that, David, where there was a possibility. I can't might not be able to play this year. Some players said, "Well, I'm not going to wait to find out. I'm out. There's no
Yeah,
guarantee. I'm not interested." And that's again that's all the stuff I'm talking about. It's going to be tough for GMs. Um, you know, Look what the Argos did, and I think a lot of teams as well did it. Is that they had to bring in as many players as they can, almost like throwing spaghetti against the wall in the hopes that they could have a team together. Like if every player that the Argos brought in, I use them as an example because we follow them closer than we do some of the other teams. If the players that they brought in had a chance to play, they wouldn't have had enough positions for the players.
yeah, and you're gonna maybe see certain veterans who were expect usually want to make a lot of money. It's gonna be tough because teams need depth. We
Yeah.
saw how many players either went on COVID lists or were injured, went on the 6 game. Like some the veterans are going to be in for a tough one. Now, one thing I will say: offensive linemen, if you got a good one, don't expect them to stay on the cheap because they teams are now having to pay up for offensive linemen. So either you got to go young and find someone that you got to build up, or you got to make sacrifices elsewhere.
Gee, does that have anything to do with the fact that you want to keep your quarterbacks healthy?
Yeah, keep your quarterbacks healthy, or try to copy a certain team that's won 2 Grey Cups in a row pretty convincingly in some ways.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah,
In a lot of ways. Yeah, no, they're the positional map that the league has. I really think that they're going to have to figure something out. It's funny you bring up the offensive linemen. But I think the league, if it's going to make fans happier, I know that winning is everything, but the entertainment value of the games that are played in the Canadian Football League have, I think people last year was like 60 cents on the dollar, if you follow what I'm saying, as far as entertainment is concerned. The entertainment value of the games was severely handicapped for whatever reason. It was not that good, especially when we talk about quarterbacks are they stir the drink in the Canadian Football League, yet quarterbacks last year didn't really play well. And if that's the star power that you sell historically, it didn't sell that well last year.
Yeah, I know. And I think a lot of teams now and a lot of management and people in management are also making the point that we have to re-sign our whole entire roster again. Like they want to make life a little easier for themselves, and players do too. There's got to be a fine. There's got to be a way. I think with this CBA coming up, and I think this will help a lot of players and teams put a little bit of guarantee on these contracts. Make a real, true commitment to what you're trying to build. You
Yeah.
know, you just mentioned add in a bunch of guys to throw spaghetti on and see what sticks. Well, that's good and all when you're trying to
No,
piece
it's just
together
playing the game that you can. That's all. It's not about what you want to do. It's what you have to do.
what you have to do, and that's the unfortunate part. Too many teams are putting their faith in a lot of things that they just don't know if it's going to work, and
And the
that's
players are paying for it, David. That's unfortunately what you're talking about is treating players with a little more. Um, I guess we talk about continuity, right, within teams for one reason because it leads to success. The other reason that continuity matters is because then it creates a relationship between the team and their fans, right? Because you have the same players. So there's an upside to keeping players on the same team for a while.
I'll add one final point here. I saw a lot of CFL fans say, I would have loved to tell a family member to buy me a jersey for Christmas, but I don't want. They're like, I don't want a blank jersey because I mean, blank football jerseys aren't. There aren't many blank football jerseys out there because you need some sort of number and player on the back. And a lot of them says, who am I going to tell them to get?
Yeah.
Who? And I mean, for the win, if you're a Blue Bombers fan, that's easy. If you're
Yeah,
a
lots of
Stampeder,
choices.
yeah, if you're a Stampeders fan, pretty easy. Maybe if you're a Ticats fan, it's easy. I mean, they'll get any jersey because they love that team there. But if you're an Argos fan, if you're a BC fan, if you're an Edmonton fan or an Ottawa fan, can you truly say that you have a player right now that you want to get a jersey for?
Are you saying that marquee players matter? Is that what you're trying to say?
Saying it without saying,
You're
but
talking about marquee players. Like, just like when you go to the theater, if there's no name on there, you know,
there's a reason
what's the point of going in, right? Like, when you go down to New York and you go along
on
the
Broadway there.
Broadway, right? It's the names that sell you the tickets. They need that. The names are the bait, and the CFL has less and less of that. It seems each year, and and you're right, but I'm not sure they're going to have to be creative in how they do it, David. I'm not sure I agree that they can do what you want to do, which is guarantee money to the players. I mean, they're going in the other direction. They're even working on now not guaranteeing money to coaches. They're trying to figure out how to do that. That's what this whole management cap's all about, right? That's a way of not guaranteeing money. In other words, you can't give a coach a 3 or 4 year contract. Yet, if the guy you want, there's still guys out there that get that money because they're the marquee right now, or at least was for the past few years, the coaches, right? They were the marquee. You said it yourself with Tressman. He was the marquee. He was the big name on the, on outside the door where you were buying the tickets. We got Tressman here.
Yeah, that's the other unfortunate part for the CFL. But I'll just say the other reason too that the CFL has had a hard time with finding the marquee in the franchise. Every single sports league does it differently. It's done through a draft or development system, in that you draft a guy, here he is on the stage, you give him the
Belongs to
jersey.
you for X amount of time.
He's here for at least, in most cases, at least 5 years, and potentially more if he lives up to the potential that we believed in when we picked him. I think that's another big issue the CFL has right now, is that the first round pick, majority of the time, I'm going to say about 80% of the time, is on offensive linemen. As valuable as offensive linemen are, they're never usually seen as the face of the franchise. I mean, if I ask any CFL fan to point out a casual CFL fan, I'm not going to say diehard,
Even really good CFL
who,
fans.
who's the right guard over there that just made that big block on that touchdown pass? They couldn't tell you most of the time. They'll tell you who the quarterback is. Some of the
They'll
people,
even tell you who the defensive lineman who almost sacked the quarterback before the
yeah,
throw went. They
the
can tell you who he
linebacker.
is.
I'm not saying it has to be a quarterback. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Defensive players can very easily be
You're
franchise
preaching from
players.
my book, David, without realizing it. Offenses in the Canadian Football League need to be fixed.
Yeah.
This year, the offenses were terrible. The offense, not every offense, for goodness sake, but offenses were, as a group, the 9 teams did not offer decent offenses. There were better defenses. I can name 5, 6 teams where I can give superlatives to their defense. There aren't 5 or 6 teams that we could give superlatives to their offense. And by superlatives, I mean superlatives, not good. I mean great.
We just mentioned a name in G. Roy Simon. Teams need to find the next G. Roy Simon. Teams need to find the next Milt Stegall, Anthony Calvillo, Ricky Ray. The one, I mean, right now, Bo Levi Mitchell is the most modern example I can think of right now.
And the guy in BC.
Yeah, Michael Riley,
Even
even
the
Trevor.
even the guy that just yeah, even the guy that just left
Well,
Montreal.
and right now the issue with Trevor Harris is he's on his third team in X amount of, like, he's gonna Ottawa, Edmonton, Montreal. Like, you see, like, if you're Trevor Harris, don't you want to find? I mean, I'm sure he does. Don't you want to find one place and stick around for a few years, 4 or 5 years, maybe? Like
The
that's
double-edged sword, David, the double-edged sword is if you get the money you want, it's gonna be really hard to stay where you wanna stay
well,
if
yeah,
you're a quarterback.
and I think that's really the issues, because look, in the CFL at the same time, people are like, oh, players just go for the money. Well, guess what? Players have also been burned because they take less money and then they get cut if the team just decides it's just either it's not working, or we need to find a way to make money for save some money.
Why was Trevor Harris released by Montreal? Because if he was with them in February,
Yeah,
$300,000 bonus money.
and I mean, we knew the writing was on the wall when Vernon Adams was brought back, but Vernon Adams is not making 300,000 in February as a roster bonus.
No.
I don't think so.
He
Maybe
doesn't even make that. I don't think he does. I don't think he even makes that as a salary.
he could potentially reach that. Maybe, I don't know how the structure. Again,
I
Frank,
would think, yeah.
we don't
No,
know.
no, I don't. And you wanted that. Now we're into.
Frank
Let's see.
Warner.
We've got 6 minutes left in the show, and then your biggest pet peeve is I
There's
want to know how much they get paid.
Frank. How did we go almost 50 minutes in the show, and we finally get to my pet peeve?
Well, I'll let you go on about what you wanted to talk about. It's on you, man.
It's just funny because, again, because I think Darius Bladek, the Argos offensive lineman, it was brought up today. He's the second highest paid offensive lineman in the CFL right now, going into next year. with all the money and guarantees and all that stuff. And people are like, oh, people won't talk about the Argos going over the cap. And I'm just like, no one for a fact can confirm that the Argos went over the cap. People have reported they went over the cap, but there's no goddamn way they can prove it because there's no.
Well, there's no way that it's open to the public,
No.
right? There's no way that an ordinary Joe and us can scour contracts, have confirmed contracts to go through.
They
This
can
is
get
like what,
reported deals.
well, Three Down Nation, they're doing their thing with you, I guess I don't know if you noticed that they're doing the contract thing. Who are the highest paid DBs I saw today, and they know somehow, at least we'll see if they're accurate or not. I mean, money
That's the
drives the bus.
problem there, right?
Money
We don't
drives
know
the
if
bus.
they're accurate. And if you know what, if a person says X team, I'm not going to use the Argos anymore because again, it'll just seem like I'm trying to defend the Argos. Any other team, if they say, "Oh, guaranteed this team went over the salary cap," and I would turn around and say, "How much do you think they went over the salary cap by?" I wouldn't know. Nobody could know other than one place, and that's the CFL's head office.
But the other thing is, even with the management cap, we just talked and bragged on the Hamilton Tiger Cats how great an organization they are because of all the great, intelligent, tall foreheads they have in the organization. How are they not over the management cap, right? I mean, they're bringing in ex GMs to take, a smaller shingle, if you will, a smaller responsibility. There is no, there is no way of knowing, and the league has what they know. Are we doubting that the league is treating every team equally? No, that's not what we're saying. We're just, the only reason people are suspicious in the way that you are, in the way that I am right now, that I'm going to take responsibility for being suspicious. I'm going to say I'm suspicious and take the hit for everybody on the planet that loves the Canadian Football League. All I got is being suspicious because I don't know. So if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, smells like a duck, why wouldn't I think it's a duck? But I don't know otherwise, right? I don't know otherwise. So unless at some point contracts become public knowledge, these kind of conversations are difficult to have, David. They're way too difficult to have.
Yeah, that you're at this rate. I think people just need to find another. You're wasting your time if you're complaining about a team going over the salary cap.
But
That's
it's
my
so important that Three Down Nation is making a big deal about how much players are paid.
yeah. No, for sure, it is. I I I just think that look, I'll take their word for it in that I know that maybe they're getting it from a decent source. Otherwise, they're not just going to put out a player's salary.
I
Because
wouldn't
guess
I
what?
wouldn't suggest it's the Players Association.
No, but I'll say this: if they were wrong, a player's going to tell them they're wrong. That's all. That'll be my final thing. Because players do follow that stuff on social media, and they will voice their criticism.
I suspect as well, David, in my opinion, that they might say it's wrong, even though it's right, because they can.
Again, you're
Because
very
how do you know? How do you
yeah,
know?
exactly. Only the players can truly. They can put up the piece of paper and say, "Here it is. This is what it
The
is."
contracts go through the Players Association.
Yeah,
If the Players Association shares that information, I don't think they're doing anything wrong, right? If it's a third party passing of information, I don't think they're doing anything wrong. I mean, the league might not like it if that's the case, but you know what? We all have a curiosity, and I think we all have a, I think it helps us in being fans to know how much players get paid.
yeah. We'll see if that ever changes. I don't suspect it will, but we'll see.
You never know.
Yeah,
You never know. Well, David, we've run out of time once again.
yeah. We have.
All right. He's David Morisuti. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. Thank you for watching CFL Talk Aaron Live. Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next
Have
time.
a happy new year, everyone.
Oh, yeah, and Happy New Year.